if you would like to go a little bit into more detail about your like entry into the work world after Georgetown, or maybe after your master's, that'd be awesome. Like, how did you start? What was your first position, etc. And kind of how did you start working with the World Bank?
Yeah, so actually I was a bit kind of slow doing internships in my, well, I didn't do any internship after my freshman year, and then I was kind of doing some stuff in Turkey after that, but they were a bit kind of last minute, so I didn't really pay attention. I didn't use internships to kind of build, I think, future work opportunities. Not that, I mean, I think people get a little overstressed about it. Some of my friends kind of used it better, but like I didn't. So I was, when the last year started, I kind of didn't have a sense of exactly what I was going to do. I was more interested either in kind of this, consulting, econ consulting side of things, or something more related to international development like the World Bank, or kind of maybe a Middle East focused NGO or so. So that was the three channels that I was thinking of applying, or I did apply. And my senior year was like rejection after rejection. Like, it was crazy. I think at some point I would just apply to places, and then if I get an interview, then I would look into the application closer. I would just apply to anything I see. But yeah, I mean, I don't remember the number of rejections I got, probably in 3 digits. And then so I was taking this class. I don't know if the professor's still teaching, Charles Udomsov. He was teaching kind of this class that you write a paper using some microdata, and then you learn Stata and you write a paper, using Stata. And I had written mine on business conditions in Turkey. And then he gave us this, this I don't know, piece of paper that said how to spam your way into the World Bank. And basically, the point was that now you have this paper from this class, and then I wrote my thesis on a similar topic. You can reach out to people in the World Bank saying, here's the topic I've written on, here's the regions, here's the topics I'm interested. I'd be super happy to kind of, grab coffee or chat if you have any time. So I basically looked at World Bank reports authored either on Turkey or to issues that I was more interested, which was kind of related to, a bit of social assistance, poverty kind of stuff, a bit of kind of business climate condition stuff. So I think I emailed maybe 20, 25 random people working in the World Bank. And then maybe 2 or 3 responded. This was April, I think. And then one of the people who responded said, let's grab coffee in May. So in the meantime, I was still applying to jobs. I got one job that based on like this Turkey research that I didn't really like that much. So I met actually with the person I had emailed in May, maybe a day before graduation. We just grabbed coffee. We talked about kind of my skills, what they do. And then a week later, after graduation, I got a job offer. He reached out to me saying, I really enjoyed our talk. Can you help us with this, with the work we're doing? And they needed someone who could speak Turkish and who could use microdata, kind of using Stata. So it was a pretty good intersection for me. And then I started right after that and kept going. So that was my application process. I mean, like these, I imagine it's, maybe for certain, some of you it's easier, some of you it's harder. But in general, my experience was that it was at some point got pretty difficult, kind of keeping applying and getting a lot of no's. But you just, you just keep going, I guess. And the last second, in a much more informal setting, not through a formal application, but through this kind of random emailing, I got the World Bank job.
Interesting. And now that you still work there, like, could you kind of explain what your day-to-day looks like? What do you practically do at the World Bank right now?
Sure. Yeah. Let me also say what I'm doing, I guess, now. I mean, it's after master's, so I don't know, maybe it's less relevant, but I mean, the application process is pretty similar. It's still a combination of like formal applications. I have a bit of a network for my master's now. We have these kind of different email listservs that we get a lot of international development related jobs. So applying through stuff that, but now, as I said, I'm it's not even selective. I'm just a bit undecided of what I want to do. So I'm remaining a bit in the World Bank, and then I'll see what I'll do. So your question was what I do day to day. Yeah. So the World Bank has, well, let me take a step back. World Bank has kind of, 3 big branches within it. One is the IFC, which works with the private sector. One is the IBRD, the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development, which works with governments more directly. And one is called MIGA. They do kind of more insurance, development-related insurance stuff, like project insurance. So I work in the IBRD, which is what is usually commonly referred as the World Bank. You know, the whole thing is the World Bank group, and then IBRD, because it works with the governments the most, that's the most, I guess, known one that's referred to as World Bank. The poverty practice is one of the operational units within the IBRD. The number of units always changes, but let's say somewhere between, around 15 operational units. There's a unit on these global practices: education, energy, water, those kind of macro fiscal, so different kind of these practices. Poverty practice is the one. It's an operational unit, but it's the most technical unit among the operational units. So we kind of measure poverty in our clients, in our regional countries. So you get, let's say, I'm working on a project in South Africa now. There's a bunch of surveys on households with firms in South Africa, and then we use those surveys to kind of measure poverty, right? This micro data. So when you read somewhere, for the first time ever, the extreme poverty rate fell under 10%. That was, I think, 2019 or something. Those numbers gets calculated country by country and gets aggregated up, right? So we're the unit that kind of calculates those numbers. So that's the more technical part. Once we have those numbers related to poverty and inequality, then you can see trends over time, right? You can see the poverty is going up in this region of this country, poverty is going down for this level of education. This could be a gender breakdown, could be different kinds of breakdowns. Then once we have those numbers of poverty and inequality, we work with governments to kind of help them in their policies relating to poor communities or vulnerable communities. So, some of the projects that I was working on before my master's was, for example, related to Syrian refugees in Turkey. We were trying to understand how can they be best, how can the government craft best policies to kind of do the socioeconomic integration of refugees. Now I'm working on a labor market project in South Africa, basically trying to understand what's been the impact of COVID and what the government can do related to those impacts. So it's a combination of this technical measurement and then kind of either technical or policy assistance to governments based on that analysis.
Great. I guess going off of that, are there any? You talked a lot about the technical skills that you're using, obviously, and probably knowledge that you gained during your master's now. So are there any other things besides that, just skills or knowledge that you really are grateful for that you have, maybe from Georgetown, maybe from other places, maybe as an international student or international alumni, and that you're really grateful for and are using, every day now at the World Bank?
Yeah. I mean, the most kind of, I guess, pragmatically, knowing some data analysis software was the most helpful in terms of actually getting the job. Because especially if you're thinking of a place like World Bank, again, as I said, my unit's a bit more technical. There are units that are even more operational and less kind of analysis heavy. But still, if if you have some competency over, I knew Stata. Now I think going forward, probably knowing R is better than knowing Stata, but Stata is still pretty heavily used in the World Bank. I learned Tableau when I was working in the World Bank, and when I started working, no one really knew Tableau in the World Bank. Now there's a lot more people, so that's kind of the data visualization part, So these kind of different softwares that can help you make analyze data and then make meaningful storylines and messages from the data for policymaking or for different concerns, I think is a very good skill to have, because especially when you're starting off right after undergrad, people don't really expect you to have super expertise on topics, right? Because you have to, even though you studied them, obviously, you're going to work with people who's been working in those for 10, 15, 20 years, right? So usually you don't bring that much topical expertise, so you have to bring some sort of technical expertise. So I think that software kind of thing is one important. A second thing I think is writing skills are pretty important. Like a lot of my work, once we kind of have this data and then we're crafting these policies, is writing a bunch of working papers. This is just writing. Just think of a World Bank report. So writing skills in that sense have been pretty important, I think, for my general kind of career. And then, the softer skills I think are always important. I mean, you do develop some of those as you work, but kind of being able to do different things at the same time, being able to kind of think critically, trying to approach problems from different perspectives, working in a team. So all those things that you would hear in general are pretty important. And those are the things that I'm sure, some of you at least have done, different kind of interviews. You get asked about too. So I think the combination of actually developing those skills and then being able to communicate how you have those skills and how those can be helpful to the organizations when you're interviewing with them are pretty important overall.
Awesome. And so related to that.
Oh, and then let me add, sorry, I'm cutting off. I would add, if you have a regional kind of interest, definitely the language is important too, right? If you are interested in West Africa, knowing French, right? If you're in Latin America, knowing Spanish and having the professional fluency for that, obviously. You can do it without, but it just closes so many doors. I mean, it makes it much more difficult then.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And are there certain things that you did at Georgetown or learned at Georgetown, certain classes that you took? I mean, you talked about that one class, obviously.
Yeah.
Or any clubs that you joined or experiences that you had that you were, that you definitely recommend, or things that certain opportunities that you didn't take and wish you had taken, or certain things that you wish you'd taken more advantage of at Georgetown?
Yeah. So I was not that involved with that many clubs. I was involved in the sense that I had a lot of friends in them, so I kind of knew what was going on and I would go to events, but I was never like personally that involved, which I think in hindsight, it would have been better if I was. Both for, you get the kind of different levels of interaction with different people. And then, so I think that's the most important part, getting to know people actually doing something you care about. But also in a more kind of strategic sense, those are the things when you're applying to internships or jobs that you can kind of build on as well, right? So I think I definitely could have been more active. I was a little, let's say there was a lot of inertia in my life. So I was, going after those a lot. In terms of, the things that I've appreciated or classes, I did take a few writing classes. I don't remember which specific ones now, but those were, I think, helpful. Or I tried to take classes that was centered around, writing essays on certain topics, even though it's not like a specific writing class, right? So building that skill of, as I said, like the Professor Udomsov's class was like that. That was using Stata writing a paper. But then there's other classes where you don't use Stata, but you just, write a more qualitative paper. But some kind of analysis writing skill. I took one of the classes I remember the most is, again, I don't know if the professor's still there, but Professor Mark Bush, who teaches classes on international trade or kind of international business diplomacy, wasn't a class for everyone. Pretty difficult and demanding. But in terms of the skills that he gave for, again, like rapidly analyzing a concept very detailedly and then presenting at a pretty professional level. I remember the presentation preparation I did for that class. I don't think I've been in a pressure situation like that in terms of putting together the presentation in professional life after. So it kind of, again, I didn't do consulting, so there's a different line of work. But so I remember that class being pretty useful. And then I would always recommend just try out of course, like the stuff I'm saying about being strategic is important, but also more important to try out the things you're interested in and then see where that goes, right? Like after college, those opportunities significantly diminish. So I wouldn't also you don't want to like over optimize to like your job choice or whatever, because a part of it is exploration.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, so I'm going to ask my last question so that everyone else can jump in, but just so you can touch upon a little bit on the process of with your visa, etc., as an international student, just what it was like to apply. Anything really you want to talk about on that subject, whether it be now or just the challenges you faced, certain advice you have on that. Yep.
Yeah. So I remember facing challenges, especially when I was trying to do the internship, because there was like difficulties with getting a CPT and then like a paid internship versus one that has a credit. Like you can get a credit, like a course, and do an internship. So the thing that I remember about that was I would never organize for it in time. Then I would do the internship in Turkey because I couldn't really stay in the US and figure everything out, right? So I guess my my recommendation would be, if you want to do that, look into it early so you figure out if you can do it, how much it makes sense to you. Again, you don't have to do that, but at least I think in my junior year, because my sophomore year I wanted to, after my summer after my sophomore year, I did want to be in Turkey. But the summer after my junior year, I think if I had organized earlier, I might have done it in the US. And then there's some tricky parts with, like, if you do something, then it eats away from your OPT afterwards. I don't know if it's the case right now, but there's all these different things. Anyway, so that's for the internships. After that, so I applied for my OPT. I got the OPT. I guess the recommendation for that is pretty standard. Try to do it as early as possible, like the first day of application that you can, and then try to figure out the day you want your OPT to start at a reasonable level. So I chose mine to start in mid-July, which was a couple months after graduation, because I didn't know if I would get a job. And I thought to myself, even if I get a job starting in July, it's pretty nice after like a couple months or a month and a half break after graduation. So I set for July, but some people set it early. Obviously, it's like a year-long visa, so the earlier you set, the earlier it expires. So I started with the OPT in the World Bank. I kept it for a year. So when you're in the World Bank, you can very easily switch to a G4 visa, right? So that's the kind of the easiest visa, or the least hassle visa to get that you can get as an international. But I did keep the OPT for a year because the thing with the G4 visa, which is like this World Bank or IMF visa, is that once you have it, you can't switch to another job that's not international, right? So in my first year in the World Bank, I kept the OPT visa because I thought maybe I'll switch to a different job under the OPT visa. After the year expired, or the year was coming to expiration, a few months before, I switched to the G4 visa because I knew I would stay longer term in the World Bank. Once you, so that's the OPT G4 thing. Right now, I'm on the OPT visa again. And then my program is a STEM program. So there's a 2-year extension. So I'm looking into kind of doing that or switching back. So that goes to what I want to do next. If I want to stay with a company that in the US that's not World Bank, then I would do the OPT extension. If I want to stay with World Bank, I'll do the G4. Should I go into the technicalities of the G4 visa as well? Or is that, I don't know, is that interesting?
Maybe you can explain a bit what the G4 visa is. I'm not sure.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the G4 visa, like I said, is an international organization visa. So if you work in the UN, if you work in the IMF, there's other stuff, you get this G4 visa, and then you can only work in that international organization. So in the World Bank, in the World Bank, there's different kinds of contracts, right? So as I said, when I first started, I was on a temporary contract, which is the same, very similar structure to a consultant position. So in those, you are working day by day or hour by hour, and the amount of days you can work in a fiscal year in the World Bank. A fiscal year is from July to next July of a calendar year. In one fiscal year, you can only work 150 days if you're a consultant or if you're a temporary staff member. So you get to a G4 visa, you become a consultant, you work up to 150 days. But once those days are finished, which if you're working full time takes like maybe 7 months or so, then you have to leave the US, and then you can come back at the beginning of the next fiscal year. So if you start in July, you work full time until, let's say, February or March, then you would have to leave the US and then come back next July if you have a consultant position again for the next year, right? Another thing you can do is you can stretch out your 150 days, right? So you can work 2-3 days a week, and then you can work for a whole year. But then if you're doing that, if this might have changed, but when I was under G4, if you're stretching your days as a consultant, then you have to leave the country every 90 days, but you can like fly to Toronto and then fly back for a day, right? So you have to do the border crossing, and as long as you do that, you can keep working. So that's the kind of the specifics of the consultant position and the G4 visa. If you're a full-time staff member in the World Bank, then you're just staying, you're working full-time with the G4 visa, so there's no issues with that. Getting the G4 visa is pretty easy. Most of the time, you have to go back to your home country or some country outside the US to get the visa, but it takes a few days to get it. Like it's a diplomatic visa. You don't get like diplomatic privileges or anything, but it's under diplomatic visa, so it's very easy to kind of get. I think there's a question in the chat. I can't see it right now, but do you mind repeating it to me? I can answer. If anyone can see it, I'm not sure.
So the question was, can you speak more about the 24 OPT STEM extension? The 24 month, I guess, yeah.
Sure. So if I don't exactly know how this is in undergrad. So if you're studying something related to mathematics or engineering, and if your program qualifies under that, my master's program qualifies it, then you can, in addition to your 12-month OPT, you get an option to extend it by 2 more years. That extension is a bit less flexible than the initial OPT. Initial OPT, you can get it without a job, and you can kind of figure out on the fly. With the 24-month STEM extension, you have to get a job, and you have to specifically state the reasons of how it relates to these STEM, science, engineering, mathematics, or technology, whatever it is, how it relates to this visa, and like why this firm is specifically hiring you. So it has to be like it has a more specific nature to it. But if you clear those things, then you can basically apply 3 or 4 months before your OPT's first year expires to extend it for another 2 years. I don't know what happens after that, honestly. Maybe you switch to a different, maybe a H-1B visa or something after those 3 years. But that's the like the 1+2 extension. I think those stuff are okay now. I think under the previous administration, it was getting a bit more tricky. But I think I'm not exactly sure, but I might do the extension in a couple months, so I'll look into it in more detail.
Awesome, thank you. So if anyone else now is the time to just jump in with any questions you have. If you want to put them in the chat, or if you want to just raise your hand, or just straight away unmute yourself, please go ahead.
Hi, Kaan. Thank you again for taking the time to speak with us today. So I've been keeping an eye on the World Bank website. I'm currently a master's student, but I don't have any professional experience of 1 to 2 or 3 years. And a lot of the entry level, the consulting positions are asking for 1 to 2 or 3 years of professional experience. So do you have any advice on how to navigate that? Like, would it be feasible even for me to apply, or should I maybe think of applying to World Bank later after I work somewhere else?
I mean, if it says 1 to 2 years, I would apply. Have you done internships or anything?
Yes, I've done internships.
Yeah, so I would kind of state those, and a lot of these things we put 1 or 2 years there, but if the applicant has other characteristics that are good, those can be overcome, I guess. So after 3, I think if it's 3-4 years, it's probably more difficult. But I think if it's 1 or 1 to 2 years, and if it's something that you have built expertise on through your classes, or maybe something related to internships, I would apply. And if you're writing a cover letter for it, I would phrase it like that, saying like, I don't maybe I've done this internship, I did this course, which was maybe a bit more applied or whatever. I would try to do those things. Getting a staff position, I think, would be pretty difficult without work experience. But a consultant, I mean, I didn't have any work experience when I got it, right? And you can do the thing, as I was saying, of emailing people, reaching out to people that are working on interesting topics for you. And the way to do that is you find the report. There's like a World Bank repository, and then email people who are usually the team task leaders they're like specified as a task leader or something in the report, or like a senior economist or a senior operations officer. That level of person usually hires for different projects. And then the email, let me tell you, email is usually the first letter of your name and then the last name. So my first name is actually Osman, So my email is like O and then my last name INAN, right? So it gets a bit tricky with two names, but you can Google people, try to find their emails, get a bit stalky, I guess.
Okay, thank you. And one other related question: when you were able to meet for coffee with the World Bank staff at the start of your job search, were they able to refer you? Is there a referral system in World Bank, or did you just simply meet with them and learn more?
Yeah, I mean, I emailed the person and we met. For consultancies and stuff, there's no like official referral process. I mean, if like your professor knows someone, they can email them and say, I know this person, they might be good, but there's no official referral there. For staff positions, I think you can list people if you know people in the World Bank, but I've never referred anyone like officially. I think technically for staff positions, it might be possible.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Hi, Kaan. Nice to meet you.
Hi,
My
nice to
name
meet you.
is Kaan. I'm Lebanese and I'm doing my master's at Georgetown now in management. And I'm also doing an internship at the World Bank in the starting business unit. So I wanted to ask you if you had any tips about getting a job there once you're inside. So
yeah. I mean, I imagine it's a bit more difficult now, with everything being remote and COVID. But in general, the thing doing the World Bank is once you start working there, I mean, first and foremost is you have to obviously do the job well. So build your connections with the team, because your most likely path to more jobs, even if it's a future consultancy or a future staff position, is going to be more with your unit, right? So that's the primary thing. So try to build also good relationships with people in your team and try to identify. I mean, you don't want to be like in the first day, you don't want to be like what's happening with jobs, but once time passes, you also want to get a sense of what's happening in the unit, how is their hiring, because once you get to know people, then people know people higher up, so you talk to them and they tell you, this unit actually this year is looking to actually lower the number of people, right? So if you get a sense of that, then you have to act based on that. So in addition to your own team, the more people you kind of like in the World Bank, is classic. Everyone grabs a coffee with someone else every day. Like it's a bit over the top sometimes. So you just like reach out to people, just you can send random emails to people. So you said you're Lebanese, right? So if you can kind of build on that with other Lebanese people in the bank, you can build on other people who are from Georgetown, right? So these kind of mutual connections. And then you just say, oh, I'm really interested in this and that. Would you mind kind of chatting over coffee? And I wouldn't go into those of like meeting the person and then saying, is there a job available in your unit? But just like honestly, just establishing a relationship and then see where that goes to, right? So that would be my kind of recommendation. It's not super easy, honestly, right? I mean, there's a lot of work to do. This stuff is extra, and then some people don't like doing it. It's a bit of professional networking, bit of socializing. Sometimes you don't feel like doing it. Like it's not like I would do this every day. But in general, I think being in that mindset is good. And then also just thinking once you're there, what are you gonna try to specialize on? Like, are you gonna focus on like which particular skill set are you gonna focus on? And then that you can do by trying to get some mentors in your own unit, right, and in adjacent units, and then try to see how their career paths have progressed, and just talking to them I think is helpful. I had people who were super helpful to me my first few years, my kind of supervisors in my unit, with the master's application process, with kind of what stuff I can do in the future. I still do. I mean, I talk to them every once in a while, more like a kind of a career chat. So building those mentorship things is nice. There's also an official mentorship program, so you can apply to that as well. You get matched with, you put your interests, you say, I'm interested in education in Latin America, and then they match you with a mentor that maybe is kind of related to that. There's a Y2Y network or something, and then there's a mentorship program within there.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Hi, Kaan. My name is Yu Hao, and I'm a freshman at Georgetown University. I'm an undergrad student. So my question is a little bit about your like undergraduate experience at Georgetown. So how did you like navigate through your undergraduate years about why you want to pursue what you are pursuing now? Like how did you gain the experience in this a field? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for the question. I wasn't, I wasn't like super crazy aware, super strategic. I knew I wanted to do something related to kind of economics or finance, or at least at the beginning, I thought I wanted to do something related to finance. And then as I learned more about finance, I decided I didn't want to do something related to finance, but actually more related to economics, which is, I mean, people ask me questions about finance all the time, and I don't really know. It's very different than the brand of economics I have studied and worked on. So I kind of, I like econ, I like politics. So I was like, I want something related to these. So I think more, it took a couple of years for me to, understand this, I think. So at this point, I have an idea. I want to do something econ. I want to do something policy related. So this is probably end of my sophomore year. So then I wanted to do the international development certificate. I think if that's the thing, I think it was that. I started taking some classes related to those. I took a class with Raj Desai, I think, if I'm not misremembering his name. He was teaching like a development survey course of like different development topics. I really liked it, but then I was at the same time wanted to keep like my private sector job prospects open. So I decided that instead of doing the international development certificate, if I do the international business diplomacy certificate, it would kind of prepare me better for like a private sector job application, and it would also not hurt my prospects of doing something more NGO or international organization related. So I kept on taking some development related classes, but I did the international business diplomacy, again, if that's the name, certificate. And that's where I took for example, the classes with Professor Bush that I was talking about. So, by the end of my senior year, having taken more of these classes, I was definitely then more set on something definitely more related to economics. And then my options, as I said before, or my paths in my head, as I said before, was this more econ-related consulting, international development, something like the World Bank, or something more policy-focused, probably related to kind of Turkey or the Middle East. So that was so for the third option, for the Turkey Middle East option, I also started taking more classes on different kind of Middle East topics. So I was trying to kind of keep a lot of doors open on the specific things that I was interested in, and then trying to build some skills along the way of learning data or learning kind of data analysis. So that's how I was going about it. But again, I definitely wasn't the most strategic. Like, it was much more on the fly. If I had to do it again, I would probably want to do it a bit more strategic, but I also would caution people to just enjoy undergrad as well. Like I think that's very important, and masters too. But I mean, definitely undergrad.
Yeah, so I was wondering if you took any internship during your undergraduate years, because I know like I have this perception that internships is a huge chunk in the job application process.
Yeah, no, honestly, it's sorry. I think it's a big chunk. I definitely I should have done my internships better, and not only for the job prospects, but I also didn't learn much from my internships. So a lot of people did internships during the semester, the school semester, in maybe the spring semester of junior or by senior year. I didn't do that. I think if you can manage that, that's fine. I think for the summer internships, just trying to. So you said you're first year, right? So I mean, I don't want to give any specific advice, but like, if I was again a freshman, I wouldn't start worrying too much from freshman year. So I didn't do an internship in my freshman year. I think you can, but I don't know what's the norm now. But back when I was there, in 2010, a lot of people did, some didn't. I didn't, and I think that was fine. I enjoyed my summer. And I also hadn't been back to Turkey for a year, so I just took my time. But I think starting from sophomore year is definitely good to kind of just getting on the internship hunt early, so that you don't miss out a bunch of opportunities. I would do a lot of like wait till February, March, and then try to find something. And then by the time I'm close to finding something, it's like early May, and then I would go back to Turkey, and then I would like get an internship in Turkey that was still good, but wasn't great. So I did my internships once with a kind of like a PE firm in Turkey, private equity firm, but like a very just on the startup phase, I guess. And then I did after my junior year with Deloitte on kind of this risk management consulting. And so in my after my sophomore year, when I did the private equity internship, I also did a portfolio management internship. So those are the finance things that I was talking about. I kind of learned that I didn't want to do that. So that was actually useful. Like I did those internships and I said, I don't really want to do this. So I learned what I didn't want to do, which is always helpful. Then in my, after my junior year, when I did the Deloitte internship, it was more closer to what I wanted to do. But again, it wasn't like super exciting, I guess. So even after that internship, I was then going into my senior year more interested in something like the World Bank International Development, because I just when I was working on very private sector oriented things, it just didn't give me as much, didn't pull me as much as was I'm working on like policy related stuff. So I wanted to go that direction. So I think using those internships to figure out what you like and what you don't like is nice. I kind of did that, but I think definitely again, I don't want to put too much pressure on like a freshman year kind of first year kind of thing, but you know, down the line, it's good to, I think, keep an eye out on opportunities. So if something that you really like pops out, you don't miss out on it. You know? So that would be, I guess, my advice.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hi, sorry. Thank you for doing this. I was wondering, do you think finding an internship or a job to begin with, I'm a junior now, would be more about networking and emailing people or the applications?
I mean, probably still primarily applications, I guess, but networking is pretty big too. So like I don't want to give like a percentage terms, but like probably slightly still more applications, but I think a part of networking, at least the initial part, is pretty low cost. Like if you just like email people, like it kind of sucks to email someone and they don't respond to you. But on the other end, like if you didn't email them, they also wouldn't respond to you, right? So it's not like nothing negative return. There's no negative returns. So I would be like pretty, if you're interested in anything, any organization, any person, what they're doing, just like, why not email them? And the more common threads you can find, like Georgetown, regional, or different kind of things, the better it is. But I still think like the actual applications are, I mean, that's what you get evaluated on still. So like, it's not like pure networking is like more, I mean, the application part is definitely necessary, right? Doing it right way. And then the networking kind of puts you a bit bonus on top of it, I think.
Thank you.
If I can jump in and actually ask a question again. You said that you were interning like in Turkey back home. And so I'm from Belgium and France, and that's also kind of what I do. I just go back during the summer and intern. And I don't know, I think other students now we find it kind of scary to do that because it feels like American students are kind of getting ahead of us because they're like networking and getting those connections and actually getting the skills that are needed to work in the US. So I was wondering how you kind of balance that using your experience abroad. And if you notice any like real differences in the way that just the work culture or in the way you apply or the way you communicate, and any things that you were able to apply like from your experience back home to working in the US.
I mean, my internships were just like I didn't do that much, so it's hard for me to, you know what I mean? Like even when I was with Deloitte, it was just a very slow summer. Like I was there for 2 months, and maybe for 5 weeks, like half of the people were playing solitaire. Like there was just no work. It was just like a weird time. So I did like I didn't learn, and so I was a bit unlucky. I mean, obviously, like if I had friends who were also interning in Deloitte in the unit under, like literally a floor under me. We would get lunch every day together, and he was working like 10 hours a day in his internship, right? So I was a bit unlucky in that sense. In terms of like the office culture and stuff, like yeah, it's a little different. I think there's a way in which like all these more international firms have a harmonized feel to them. So if you work in like a more like I mean, I don't know what a traditional Turkish firm means, but it's something that's not Deloitte or like a big corporation like that, then it would be a bit more different. But I think in my experiences with more like bigger organizations, so the professional relationships weren't like incredibly different than the US. I think one thing that's different in Turkey, I don't know, everyone's home country is a bit different. One thing that's in Turkey is like this, the social aspect of it is even more important. Like there's just more elements of socialization that kind of it could even boost your career. And which, funny enough, like in the World Bank, that is also a little more important than your probably average US job. Maybe like these kind of pseudo professional social relationships that you establish. Apart from that, I think one risk of doing internships at your home country is if so when I was interviewing for jobs, everyone asked me about like my internship in Deloitte, but then the other two internships, they were two of the biggest banks in Turkey, but I don't think they had that much international recognition. So people would always, when they saw my resume, they would always ask about Deloitte and wouldn't really ask about the other internships. Maybe that was because they were after my sophomore year and the Deloitte one was after my junior year, but maybe also because that's the more kind of known firm, and then maybe the firms that are not known internationally might not give you an advantage in the US interviewing process. So that's a possibility, I guess.
Thank you. If anyone has any other questions, please jump in. No pressure.
So yeah, so I also like struggle between like you in the undergraduate years. I also struggle between like if I want to work in a private sector or if I want to work in the international organization.
No.
So yeah. I mean, this is not like a question. This is like a sharing. So I don't know. I'm still figuring this out. Whether if I want to work in an international organization or a private sector organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you go to college for, right? To kind of figure that out. And I would say, even if you don't do like a bunch of internships on all fields, just trying to get a sense of how you feel in those situations through more applied classes or some, shorter internships or maybe some independent research projects and stuff like that, just to get a sense of it is, I think it's good. But like, I think if you're super set on something right now, that would probably be more unusual than being more uncertain.
I do want to take this opportunity to ask, like, what is it like to work at the World Bank? How is it different from like private organization, private sector companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think just in terms of how to say it, not logistical, but in terms of like the day-to-day aspects of it, the speed is not as, the project turnover, at least in my unit, is not as fast as what you would have in private sector. So there are definitely periods of like before you're meeting with the governments, or if you have something on the field, like something that if you have to run a survey on the field and it has to be done by a certain deadline, then it can get much more high paced. But the general flow of things is slower than the private sector. So you get into a project, you are doing research, writing a paper, it takes a few months. Sometimes there is no real client. You might be working on like a knowledge product. So the World Bank, our unit, has a lot of knowledge products of like, this is a topic that you want to investigate. So it's at least in the unit I'm in, somewhere between private sector and academia, right? It's close. I would still say it's closer to the private sector than it is to the academia in terms of the work. But yeah, so that pace is different. Again, my unit, like I was saying, is operational, but it's also pretty research heavy. So depending on the project I'm in, I might have very limited client interaction. It might be much more kind of analysis. And then on certain projects, then I would travel and meet with kind of government officials. So in terms of being client facing or not, it really kind of depends on the project and the unit. And more broadly in the World Bank, what I've said, these operational units like energy poverty. So those are the units that are doing these different usually loan-based projects with the government. So here's some money to kind of build a dam, right? And then there's a bunch of different practices that work on how to do it best. So that's the operational side. And then there's also a research unit within the World Bank. So if you're working in a research unit, it's just called the development economics unit, then you're doing like 70, 80, 90% research, and then you're helping out operational units with some technical expertise. So if they want to do if you want to do like an impact evaluation on a intervention that we're doing, we can team up with the research unit in the World Bank, so they kind of help us with the nuts and bolts of kind of doing that impact evaluation, right? So there's all these internal clients within the World Bank as well, like different units help out each other on different projects and different expertise. So as I said, the one difference is the pace of the project. The other difference is this difference between operational and technical units, and just the sheer size of the organization has a bureaucratic weight to it that a lot of firms wouldn't have, right? So dealing something with the HR, dealing something with that, I would imagine takes much shorter in a lot of private sector jobs. Although people also always say that the UN is worse. So if you want to compare it to the UN, then the World Bank's a bit better there. And then finally, I would say, especially if you're a consultant, there's no structural career monitoring or anything like that, right? I mean, like there's barely a way that you can get insurance, never mind the career guidance. So if you're a consultant or if you're in a temporary contract, you really have to kind of look out for anything related to that on your own, right? If you have to find your own mentor, you have to figure out how your career is going to go, because if you're a consultant, you're much more kind of not within the World Bank's systematic or structural employment procedures. So that's, I think, very different. That would be more like contracting with a private sector firm, right? Which is very different. You're not. Whereas if you start in like a big consulting firm, you have 2 mentors, you have a 3-year plan, you have a 2-year evaluation, 6-month feedback. So all those things, if you're not fully staffed, are not existent in the US. Not existent in the World Bank. And then if you are a staff member, then there's more of that, and they've been recently building that. But I think even though they have been recently building it, it's still probably not as airtight as some other private sector companies, especially like the big management consulting companies would have in terms of that career guidance. So it's a bit more chaotic in that sense. And the good thing is, let me just say, I think one of the best parts is there's a lot of resources, right? And you get a lot of access to the governments you're working with. Like you can be in pretty like, it doesn't look like a top level meeting like with a minister, but like you are at the table of implementing policy. Sometimes the World Bank has done very bad things being on the table, but it's up to you and your team to a certain extent. And there's obviously some organizational pulls. As I said, a huge organization, so there's mandates. So some stuff is out of your hands, but at least you have a very big access to a lot of government policies, which you might not have in different international development organizations.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That was a good question. I guess we can kind of end on that, unless you want to add something more about, what is kind of like the best part of working at the World Bank or what you enjoy the most. But you might have already mentioned it.
Yeah, no. So the last thing I said, I think is important. What I enjoyed the most, honestly, the people have been great. Because of the reason I was saying, there's not too much of this structural or structure to lift you up in certain cases, right? This organizational structure. The people you work with is very important. So far, I've been really lucky in terms of the people I worked with. I mean, the one thing is everyone's super international, right? So I do enjoy that, kind of meeting people from different backgrounds. And then everyone has been just at a personal level very good. I've heard of people who have not. Sorry, sorry. Am I back? I've heard of people who haven't had that great experiences. They've didn't work well with their supervisors or their teams. So it's, again, there's I don't know, 20,000 people working or some crazy number. So obviously there's going to be good and bad experiences. But so far the people I work with has been a great experience. And then it's like the work-life balance is pretty good. Like that might be like, if you want to exploit that, you can exploit that, which is bad. You can get away with not doing too much stuff sometimes, which probably you couldn't get away as much in a private sector, in many private sector jobs. I don't want to say all. But if you are kind of working as you should, then the general work-life balance, the pay, if you're a staff member, the pension's very good. So all those like other kind of things are pretty good. And then at the end of the day, the thing that's probably the most important to me is at least what you're trying to do is something meaningful, right? Again, not everything you do is necessarily good, but for me, it's important to work on something that is trying to help people who need it to a certain extent. So, but again, that's not for everyone too. So that's it's a bit more about me, I guess.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Go ahead.
And final note, would you mind if you could share your contact information in the chat?
Yes. Yes. No, I definitely can. I'm just on my phone, so let me figure that out. Yeah, so I am sending it now. Yeah, feel free to email me with anything. If I don't respond, email me again, and then if I don't respond, email me again. It's not a problem. So yeah, that's my Gmail. Yeah, so yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Well, we don't want to take too much of your time, but thank you so much for answering all those questions and for giving a lot of advice and insights. Yeah, I think everyone enjoyed it, and I would definitely send out an email again with your contact to everyone. Yeah. And thank you so much.
No, sounds great. No, thank you so much, Luca, for organizing, and thanks everyone for joining and asking questions. My final message would be like, obviously, you got to find a job, or a career, but don't be overstressed about it. In my experience, I got definitely more than 100 rejections, and then it happened at the end. So it's not easy. It sucks sometimes, but just things fall into place.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.